Story 8 of Day and Night Stories by Algernon Blackwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Story 8, Cain's Atonement. So many thousands today have deliberately put self aside and are ready to yield their lives for an ideal, that it is not surprising if few of them should have registered experiences of a novel order. For to step aside from self is to enter a larger world, to be open to new impressions. If powers of good exist in the universe at all, they can hardly be inactive at the present time. The case of two men who may be called Jones and Smith occurs to the mind in this connection. Whether a veil actually was lifted for a moment, or whether the tension of long and terrible months resulted in an exaltation of emotion, the experience claims significance. Smith, to whom the experience came, holds the firm belief that it was real. Jones, though it involved him too, remained unaware. It is a somewhat personal story, their peculiar relationship dating from early youth. A kind of unwilling antipathy was born between them, yet an antipathy that had no touch of hate or even of dislike. It was rather in the nature of an instinctive rivalry. Some tie operated that flung them ever into the same arena with strange persistence, and ever as opponents. An inevitable fate delighted to throw them together in a sense that made them rivals. Small as well as large affairs betrayed this malicious tendency of the gods. It showed itself in earliest days at school, at Cambridge, in travel, even in house parties and the lighter social intercourse. Though distant cousins, their families were not intimate, and there was no obvious reason why their paths should fall so persistently together. Yet their paths did so, crossing and recrossing in the way described. Sooner or later, in all his undertakings, Smith would note the shadow of Jones darkening the ground in front of him; and later, when called to the bar in his chosen profession, he found most frequently that the learned counsel in opposition to him was the owner of this shadow, Jones. In another matter too they became rivals, for the same girl, oddly enough, attracted both, and though she accepted neither offer of marriage, during Smith's lifetime, the attitude between them was that of unwilling rivals, for they were friends as well. Jones, it appears, was hardly aware that any rivalry existed. He did not think of Smith as an opponent, and as an adversary never. He did notice, however, the constantly recurring meetings, for more than once he commented on them with good-humoured amusement. Smith, on the other hand, was conscious of a depth and strength in the tie that certainly intrigued him. Being of a thoughtful, introspective nature, he was keenly sensible of the strange competition in their lives, and sought in various ways for its explanation, though without success. The desire to find out was very strong in him; and this was natural enough, owing to the singular fact that in all their battles he was the one to lose. Invariably Jones got the best of every conflict. Smith always paid; sometimes he paid with interest. Occasionally, too, he seemed forced to injure himself while contributing to his cousin's success. It was very curious. He reflected much upon it. He wondered what the origin of their tie and rivalry might be, but especially why it was that he invariably lost, and why he was so often obliged to help his rival to the point even of his own detriment. Tempted to bitterness sometimes, he did not yield to it, however. The relationship remained frank and pleasant; if anything, it deepened. He remembered once, for instance, giving his cousin a chance introduction, which yet led, a little later, to the third party offering certain evidence which lost him an important case, Jones, of course, winning it. The third party, too, angry at being dragged into the case, turned hostile to him, thwarting various subsequent projects. In no other way could Jones have procured this particular evidence; he did not know of its existence even. That chance introduction did it all. There was nothing the least dishonourable on the part of Jones; it was just the chance of the dice. The dice were always loaded against Smith; and there were other instances of similar kind. About this time, moreover, a singular feeling that had lain vaguely in his mind for some years past took more definite form. It suddenly assumed the character of a conviction that yet had no evidence to support it. A voice, long whispering in the depths of him, became much louder, grew into a statement that he accepted without further ado. "I'm paying off a debt," he phrased it. "An old, old debt is being discharged. I owe him this, my help and so forth." He accepted it, that is, as just, and this certainty of justice kept sweet his heart and mind, shutting the door on bitterness or envy. The thought, however, though it recurred persistently with each encounter, brought no explanation. When the war broke out, both offered their services. As members of the O.T.C. they got commissions quickly, but it was a chance remark of Smith's that made his friend join the very regiment he himself was in. They trained together, were in the same retreats, and the same advances together. Their friendship deepened. Under the stress of circumstances, the tie did not dissolve, but strengthened. It was indubitably real, therefore. Then, oddly enough, they were both wounded in the same engagement. And it was here the remarkable fate that jointly haunted them betrayed itself more clearly than in any previous incident of their long relationship. Smith was wounded in the act of protecting his cousin. How it happened is confusing to a layman, but each apparently was leading a bombing party, and the two parties came together. They found themselves shoulder to shoulder, both brimmed with that pluck which is complete indifference to self. They exchanged a word of excited greeting, and the same second one of those rare opportunities of advantage presented itself which only the highest courage could make use of. Neither, certainly, was thinking of personal reward. It was merely that each saw the chance by which instant heroism might gain a surprise advantage for their side. The risk was heavy, but there was a chance; and success would mean a decisive result, to say nothing of high distinction for the man who obtained it, if he survived. Smith, being a few yards ahead of his cousin, had the moment in his grasp. He was in the act of dashing forward when something made him pause. A bomb in mid-air, flung from the opposing trench, was falling. It seemed immediately above him. He saw that it would just miss himself, but land full upon his cousin, whose head was turned the other way. By stretching out his hand, Smith knew he could field it like a cricket ball. There was an interval of a second and a half, he judged. He hesitated, perhaps a quarter of a second, then he acted. He caught it. It was the obvious thing to do. He flung it back into the opposing trench. The rapidity of thought is hard to realize. In that second and a half Smith was aware of many things. He saved his cousin's life unquestionably. Unquestionably also Jones seized the opportunity that otherwise was his cousin's. But it was neither of these reflections that filled Smith's mind. The dominant impression was another. It flashed into actual words inside his excited brain. "I must risk it. I owe it to him, and more besides." He was, further, aware of another impulse than the obvious one. In the first fraction of a second it was overwhelmingly established, and it was this, that the entire episode was familiar to him. A subtle familiarity was present. All this had happened before. He had already, somewhere, somehow, seen death descending upon his cousin from the air. Yet with a difference. The difference escaped him. The familiarity was vivid. That he missed the deadly detonators in making the catch, or that the fuse delayed, he called good luck. He only remembers that he flung the gruesome weapon back whence it had come, and that its explosion in the opposite trench materially helped his cousin to find glory in the place of death. The slight delay, however, resulted in his receiving a bullet through the chest, a bullet he would not otherwise have received, presumably. It was some days later, gravely wounded, that he discovered his cousin in another bed across the darkened floor. They exchanged remarks. Jones was already decorated, it seems, having snatched success from his cousin's hands, while little aware whose help had made it easier. And once again there stole across the inmost mind of Smith that strange insistent whisper, I owed it to him. But, by God, I owe more than that. I mean to pay it too. There was not a trace of bitterness or envy now, only this profound conviction of obscurest origin that it was right and absolutely just, full, honest repayment of a debt incurred. Some ancient balance of account was being settled. There was no chance. Injustice and caprice played no role at all. And a deeper understanding of life's ironies crept into him, for if everything was just, there was no room for whimpering. And the voice persisted, above the sound of busy footsteps in the ward. I owe it. I'll pay it gladly. Through the pain and weakness the whisper died away. He was exhausted. There were periods of unconsciousness, but there were periods of half-consciousness as well, then flashes of another kind of consciousness altogether, when, bathed in high, soft light, he was aware of things he could not quite account for. He saw. It was absolutely real. Only the critical faculty was gone. He did not question what he saw as he stared across at his cousin's bed. He knew. Perhaps the beaten, worn-out body let something through at last. The nerves, overstrained to numbness, lay very still. The physical system, battered and depleted, made no cry. The clamour of the flesh was hushed. He was aware, however, of an undeniable exaltation of the spirit in him as he lay and gazed towards his cousin's bed. Across the night of time, it seemed to him, the picture stole before his inner eye with a certainty that left no room for doubt. It was not the cells of memory in his brain of to-day that gave up their dead, it was the eternal self in him that remembered and understood, the soul. With that satisfaction which is born of full comprehension, he watched the light glow and spread about the little bed. Thick matting deadened the footsteps of nurses, orderlies, doctors. New cases were brought in, old cases were carried out. He ignored them. He saw only the light above his cousin's bed grow stronger. He lay still and stared. It came neither from the ceiling nor the floor. It unfolded like a cloud of shining smoke. And the little lamp, the sheets, the figure framed between them, all these slid cleverly away and vanished utterly. He stood in another place that had lain behind all these appearances, a landscape with wooded hills, a foaming river, the sun just sinking below the forest, and dusk creeping from a gorge along the lonely banks. In the warm air there was a perfume of great flowers and heavy-scented trees. There were fireflies, and the taste of spray from the tumbling river was on his lips. Across the water a large bird flapped its heavy wings as it moved downstream to find another fishing place, for he and his companion had disturbed it as they broke out of the thick foliage and reached the river bank. The companion, moreover, was his brother. They ever hunted together. There was a passionate link between them born of blood and of affection. They were twins. It all was as clear as though of yesterday. In his heart was the lust of the hunt. In his blood was the lust of woman, and thick behind these lurked the jealousy and fierce desire of a primitive day. But though clear as of yesterday, he knew that it was of long, long ago. And his brother came up close beside him, resting his bloody spear with a clattering sound against the boulders on the shore. He saw the gleaming of the metal in the sunset. He saw the shining glitter of the spray upon the boulders. He saw his brother's eyes look straight into his own, and in them shone a light that was neither the reflection of the sunset nor the excitement of the hunt just over. "It escaped us," said his brother. "Yet I know my first spear struck." "It followed the fawn that crossed," was the reply. "Besides, we came down wind, thus giving it warning. Our flocks at any rate are safer." The other laughed significantly. It is not the safety of our flocks that troubles me just now, brother," he interrupted eagerly, while the light burned more deeply in his eyes. "It is rather that she waits for me by the fire across the river, and that I would get to her. With your help added to my love," he went on in a trusting voice, "the gods have shown me the favour of true happiness." He pointed with his spear to a camp fire on the farther bank, turning his head as he strode to plunge into the stream and swim across. For an instant, then, the other felt his natural love turn into bitter hate. His own fierce passion, unconfessed, concealed, burst into instant flame. That the girl should become his brother's wife sent the blood surging through his veins in fury. He felt his life and all that he desired go down in ashes. He watched his brother stride towards the water, the deerskin cast across one naked shoulder, when another object caught his practised eye. In mid-air it passed suddenly like a shining gleam. It seemed to hang a second, then it swept swiftly forward past his head and downward. It had leaped with a blazing fury from the overhanging bank behind. He saw the blood still streaming from its wounded flank. It must land, he saw it with a secret awful pleasure, full upon the striding figure whose head was turned away. The swiftness of that leap, however, was not so swift but that he could easily have used his spear. Indeed, he gripped it strongly. His skill, his strength, his aim, he knew them well enough. But hate and love, fastening upon his heart, held all his muscles still. He hesitated. He was no murderer, yet he paused. He heard the roar, the ugly thud, the crash, the cry for help, too late, and when an instant afterwards his steel plunged into the great beast's heart, the human heart and life he might have saved lay still forever. He heard the water rushing past, an icy wind came down the gorge against his naked back, he saw the fire shine upon the further bank, and the figure of a girl in skins was wading across, seeking out the shallow places in the dusk and calling wildly as she came. Then darkness hid the entire landscape, yet a darkness that was deeper, bluer than the velvet of the night alone. And he shrieked aloud in his remorseful anguish, "May the gods forgive me, for I did not mean it! Oh, that I might undo, that I might repay!" That his cries disturbed the weary occupants in more than one bed is certain, but he remembers chiefly that a nurse was quickly by his side, and that something she gave him soothed his violent pain and helped him into deeper sleep again. There was, he noticed anyhow, no longer the soft, clear, blazing light about his cousin's bed. He saw only the faint glitter of the oil lamps down the length of the great room. And some weeks later he went back to fight. The picture, however, never left his memory. It stayed with him as an actual reality that was neither delusion nor hallucination. He believed that he understood at last the meaning of the tie that had fettered him and puzzled him so long. The memory of those far-off days of shepherding beneath the stars of long ago remained vividly beside him. He kept his secret, however. In many a talk with his cousin beneath the nearer stars of Flanders, no word of it ever passed his lips. The friendship between them, meanwhile, experienced a curious deepening, though unacknowledged in any spoken words. Smith, at any rate on his side, put into it an affection that was a brave man's love. He watched over his cousin. In the fighting especially, when possible, he sought to protect and shield him, regardless of his own personal safety. He delighted secretly in the honours his cousin had already won. He himself was not yet even mentioned in dispatches, and no public distinction of any kind had come his way. His V.C. eventually well, he was no longer occupying his body when it was bestowed. He had already left. He was now conscious, possibly, of other experiences besides that one of ancient primitive days when he and his brother were shepherding beneath other stars. but the reckless heroism which saved his cousin under fire may later enshrine another memory, which at some far future time shall reawaken as a hallucination from a past that to day is called the present. The notion, at any rate, flashed across his mind before he left. End of Story 8